Hello world! Patricia O'Connor and Frida Reba Dorsey here today on the Bonsai balcony. It's going to be Literati Day. Literati Day. This is my Japanese black pine impression of a literati, and it is in need of a little bit of cleanup and maybe some pruning and some cutback, a little needle selection, maybe a little candle selection here, cutting back of buds, and this is probably going to be a multi-parter. I may actually, when we're done, I plan to rewire the trunk, maybe put a little bit more motion in this guy. Maybe bring these in a little. Right now they feel pretty stiff. I don't know how sold I am on that. Sometimes something feels kind of stiff until you start working on it a little. But what I would do, I would like to see a little bit more motion in it. I think it probably had a little bit more motion in it when I got it. And we've all been kind of kicking back. I've been feeding it, and it's had some killer escape routes. It mixed them very quickly. So there's a lot of cleanup that I can be doing here. And on the by and by, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that before I'm done, I may do a little bit of a restyle of this tree. Now, also may not. I've been thinking about this for a few days and making sure that I had everything I needed around me for whenever we get to that stage. But there's also, in thinking about it, you might actually, in the doing, visualize something else. Then, you know, when it comes actually down to it, after I clean it up and stuff, I may decide that I'm less enthused about some of the styling ideas. I mean, that can happen too. But for the most part, I'm thinking that I would like to put a little bit more. I'd like to wrap this guy, and we're starting to see bark here on the bottom, and it's starting to work its way up. I don't know at what point. For a tree that's this thick, at what point this is going to begin to get a little stiff. I've got a lot of cutback I need to do on this. But as the literati goes, and while I'm cleaning up needles, this is the first part. I'm trying to get better at this, and I think I already have. We did have our damage to the needle release tree this year, but that's I caught aphids. This tree, I caught aphids on this tree, and I found them on this tree, which I guess I should say I didn't personally catch aphids. Right now, what you see me doing is pulling these extra long needles. I'm just going through, pulling these guys out. I'm not pulling very hard. They're the ones that are longer than they were in their working life, and that is because they've kind of let go, and that's why they're taller than their brethren, and that makes them easy to pluck. At this stage of the game, if I give them a little tug on the end, and I'm tugging them from the same direction as the follicle that they come out of, and if I do that, and it doesn't come out easy, that's a good indication that it didn't want to give up that needle. So unless you're just thinning needles, that's kind of how you know to do that. Now, I'm seeing a lot of things that we're going to be working on with this tree. One, these hoops, these are kind of hoop shaped. All of those are going like this. And I was noticing that we were getting wire scars and some dig in on there. So I pulled all the wiring off of this guy a little while ago, and I decided, I thought that I would make this, something that we could work on Saturday Night Live Bonsai, although this tree and I have a hard time working in the same room together. I'm aware of the situation that we're in right now. For me to work the top of this tree, it's a tall drink of water, as am I, but it's not the thickest tree with the biggest limbs to match this height because it's literati. So to not cut us both off at the shoulders means the camera is back a little ways, which means I'm probably screaming or I have to worry about not being heard. And I have to be concerned with how much detail you can actually see. If I zoom in, then we are not in frame. And so that's a little bit of our restriction, but I think we still can mostly pull this off. And yeah, this is going to be a multi-part. This one will probably just mostly deal with getting rid of old needles, and we're actually going to do some pruning work on this guy too. That's going to be part of the cleanup. What I've been doing for the past 2 years is trying to get a feel for the balance and of this tree, and learn how to handle it. Very, small amount of pot there. So the idea is that I kind of treated this like some of my smaller trees, and in doing that, I left it in a tray of substrate so that it can have escape roots, because I felt like it was delicate and under potted, but and then I'll let it go. So if I let it go, I mean I'll let it produce lots of back buds, and I fed it. I don't mean I let it go. I mean I fed it and did a bunch of stuff that you do to keep a tree nice and healthy and all that stuff. So I did that for a couple of years, and then the other day, when looking back at it in video, I saw just how much growth we had achieved. And I was like, yeah, we should probably, like I said, we had intended, at one point, to do a Saturday Night Live with this, but when I brought the tree down off the shelf and got this close to it to start setting up the shot, what I actually saw was aphids, and so that just kind of, we did a different show. And at that point, I let her recover from me and those guys. I say me and those guys. What I'm mostly trying to do when I work on this, and it took me a long time to get it, frankly, what I'm trying to do is come up from the bottom and grab the needles. Not, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I'm listening to the wind whistle through the pine trees behind me. I did not know we were in for that today. Good. So, what I'm talking about, what I finally learned was, instead of coming in on the top, I remember one time somebody looking at my trees, and they were a very learned person. They really knew their bonsai. They really knew. And when they looked at my trees, they went, I see that you're reaching in from above on the trees, and you're being clumsy around the needles. And a lot of what I see in the way of damage is damage by you and not by bugs or pests. And what they were basically talking about is, if you kind of boink a needle, boink like that, you may have caused it to just hemorrhage there, and that will cause a band on it that you'll see later. You won't even see it immediately. So cause and effect might not always be apparent to you for some time. So what I'm trying to do is come up from the bottom, and you'll see guys handle these more than I have been, but they know how to handle them, and they're not handling them in the wrong way, and so they can go through and remove their undergrowth or their third-year needles or something like that, and they will not be causing damage while they're doing it, and that's just a mark of better bonsai. So, like I say, when you know better, you do better, and at the same time, in my case, I'm just learning how difficult that is for me to do, because I guess I might be a little handsy, I don't know. But here's another thing: when it came to aphids, when it came to looking down and seeing those little guys everywhere, well, they're wrecking stuff. That's their job. They can just come in and just wreck stuff. So I was not as worried. I wasn't worried about doing a little third-year needle damage or second-year needle damage when it came to plucking those guys out from in between buds. Sprayed with neem and soap with their woolly, and that can also protect them. So you gotta like hose them, and then at some point you probably need to be concerned about getting all of that stuff off once you've already gotten rid of your predators. And I also did a systemic. So what I'm doing is all of these needles that are extra long, kind of easy. It's kind of easy to grab the long ones. They're sticking up above the first and second year needles, and when I grab one of those, the tree grabs back like what you just saw. So before I'm completely done here, this could change. This is just what I've been thinking about in the get your head right for this video prelim for this. I've been thinking that we might use a fulcrum to get a couple, one bend down low on the trunk of this tree. I might grab a bar of metal, and we'll show how we'll practice good measures to protect the tree from the bar, while at the same time using the bar as a fulcrum to achieve what could be a tricky bend. And we'll evaluate that. It might be that that's something that in the end we're not as crazy about as I think we are at this stage. But I do have several ideas in mind, and I would like to not go too crazy. This is already a pretty okay tree. When I got it, it had a little bit more motion in the trunk, and it may have straightened out some. It's hard to tell. Sometimes you lose a little depth on in photography or video, so it may have lost more. You know, it may be that it looked straighter in video, but I'm thinking that we could put just a little bit of motion into this guy. It was really pretty when I got it, and it was very minimal. It was also pale. I asked if it was a white pine. All that means is that it wasn't in the time of year to be fed or something. But in the time that I've had it, it's started to take on bark, and slim, ultra slim is hopefully going to stay in proportionate and stuff, which it seemingly has. But we've increased the bud count on this tree. Stay focused, Pat. Stay up here. We've increased the bud count on this tree, and all of these little pads are thicker and bushier. Probably a little more so than we need. So I'm thinking I'll probably go through and eliminate a little bit of this. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. And then when we're done with that, we will wrap the trunk with wire and put some motion in the trunk to what we've deemed appropriate. You know, it's like I have a little something in mind right now, but maybe when I start working with the tree, that'll change it. And yeah, and maybe once I start working, that'll change. So this is pretty easy and kind of judgment proof. You just look on level at the height of the needles that are currently in charge of production, you know, this year's needles and second year needles. And then you see the things that are sticking up above them, and you go, yep, that's our third year guys. And they weren't sticking up like that a little while ago. They were just starting to do that now at their older age because they've let go in the follicle and they're just, that's it, they're ready to go. You can also see a little yellowing on the tip. However, I also have some of that for heat damage reasons. That happened. I'll be able to see that. I'll be able to see that all over the tree for probably a couple of years. So that's kind of what I have. That's kind of what I have in mind. And we're not going to do all of that in this setting. This will probably be a cleanup of the Literati Pine and restyle part 1. It'll probably be something like that. Oop, okay, you can have it. I didn't want it. After I pull out all of these extended needles, I'll go back through and start doing a little bud selection because I hadn't been. I'll try to get these pads because they're Literati pads. I'm not looking on this tree yet. I'm not looking to build big, huge, flat pads. We're still going minimal. That's kind of what Literati means to me. I think we need more shape. I don't think we need more foliage. See how that, you kind of see how this works. I can just look at those guys and see the ones that are notably taller and a little yellow on the tip. And thank you all, needles. Y'all did a great job. Y'all made a wonderful tree. We did a show last weekend, over and under watering, and I was kind of focused in on my ponderosa and scratching the soil back. And what I could see was what I would hope to see, big rocky chunks for a big tree that's doing a lot of that's producing a lot of stuff right now. So we want kind of big chunky roots. We're not looking for super refined roots at this point. We're building, and but every time I scratch down in the soil a little bit to do my little what's it look like down there, it's just stayed wet long, and I just stayed. That was puzzling and disturbing. It was worrisome to me. So here's what I decided to do. The trunk on that tree is kind of divided up by the root system that we see on the surface. By the surface roots, it kind of divides it up into sections. And I took one of those sections and swept all the top soil, all the that layer of chunky stuff that I saw on the top. This is it. I swept it up and put it in this bowl and set it to the side of the tree. And now what I was looking at was something that looks compact and not like the best soil in the world. Maybe it was better suited to someplace it was now, but I don't think it's repotting time. I believe this guy has been in there like 3 years. It's not, I don't think that container is completely full of roots, but then once I swept it back and saw how compact and kind of just almost looking like mud that surface soil was with a top, with a little dressing above, I was like, well, I can see why that was taking longer to dry out than I thought. And based on that, I probably wasn't seeing any overwatering issues in the summer because it could take up water that fast, and evaporation would also suck some water up. And then last winter it stayed upstate, so it would have been cold and had gone dormant. But having said that, yeah, I think it's a wonder. I think I was definitely on a path to overwatering that tree. I'll just go ahead and say it that way. Bird just flew in and out of the house. There were peanuts on the counter, but there's also some behind me. I think you need to get stuck in the house for those. So that's heartening. Not disheartening, that's heartening. As you can, I don't know if you can see it in the shot. I've got it tilted up, and I've got the tree tilted up, and I've got that substrate kind of swept away. There was no roots in it, so it's not like I uprooted anything. But now I can exactly see it is only now, and I did that 2 days ago, and only now is it starting to look like, if I can wait till the end of the day, it would be the sweet spot. And it hadn't probably been in the sweet spot in quite some time. So yeah, probably should have been more proactive about that than now. But having said that, I don't think it's been an issue. I don't think it's been an issue till now. Last winter, it overwintered somewhere else, and this summer, it was drinking it all up. It was drinking up all that water anyway. But when the tree slows down, and it's probably been that way for a month, and I've probably been close to overwatering the tree about that one. I've been having a hard time finding the balance because I didn't have all the information. Okay, so. Okay. That's the little catch us up on that on the ponderosa. When I graft the ponderosa again, also, I'm going to have the same scions or donor or genetics that we had last time. Simply being a Japanese black pine is not enough. So I have to figure out that logistically, or I'm gonna maybe have to experiment with the idea of letting our graft grow out, the one that's on there, and then taking scions from it. The downside to that is we lose time. We lose time where the bark approaches further down the limb. So that was a little catch us up there. I have colanders in place, and I have some terracotta pots that we could certainly do some cool stuff with some of our little pines with some of these terracotta pots, or with our colanders. Now here's the thing. When I purchased a tree some years ago, really nice tree, and it was so nice that I wanted one that was in a cup that was a seedling of the same species, so I could have a better learning experience on how to keep the special tree. And so while I was standing there with a rather expensive tree and a $12 tree, I was told that for the $12 tree to spend as much time, that my biggest priority was the roots. That what I did right then in the way of movement on the trunk coming out of the ground, and what I did in the way of roots would leave a lasting good or bad impression from then on. So the time to be proactive and to do cool things was then, and not constantly, but just at the right time, kind of a deal. And knowing what those were was awesome. And like what I just said, getting movement out of a seedling when it's young and really flexible, that's so valuable. And getting that movement early, just coming right out of the ground and moving in some really nice ways, that's also a big old huge plus. And then on top of that, if you do things to promote those long roots, like you see some pine trees have these long roots, and those do a very good job of barking over, and those do a really good job of barking over, and you can fan those out to make trunks, or you can twist them, or you can spin them, or you can turn the tree upside down and have the roots be inverted and then go down, which kind of gives it a spider leg look. And that sounds like I'm talking weird sci-fi on bonsai, but if you see it, you go, oh yeah, I would, yeah, you know, it's, I find the many different aspects of that appealing. So expect us to do a lot more of that on the show. As far as this guy, expect us to go through, now that we've had a few weeks to recover from from our aphids and from Pat storming through here, all guns a-blazing like Rambo. Then so with that in hand, it just seemed like a good time to get started where we needed to go anyway. And in that time, I've decided to do more than I was originally cool with. One thing I did was I started looking back at our videos and seeing what we started with. And while it was a lot wispier, a lot lighter in design, I'm not knocking what we're doing either. I think I've got some of these candles are a little long when they're not part of the design. It's definitely time to go through there and do something about that. So we have some cleanup plus a little restock. But bonsai is you have to be able to roll with stuff. I knew at some point our little tree was going to start showing, more signs of growing up, like bark and stuff. It's absolutely cool. But we're going to have to work. We're going to have to work with our design and roll with our design over the years. Beautiful day. It's quite warm. While oh, that's right. Golly, that same wind. While in LA, the California wildfires are just absolutely brutal. Other parts of our country are getting pelted with snow. So I hope if you're hunkered down and you're safe and warm wherever you are, I hope you're hunkered down and you're safe and warm, or you're safe and dry, or you're safe and not warm. Whatever it is you need to be happy. It's the little things. Being able to stay warm when it's cold. Or not having to run from your life from a disaster, a natural disaster, not a natural disaster. It's looking a little better already. One thing will lead to the other. When it comes time to prune this guy back, part of it I'll be standing up like I am now, but at least during the closer to the bottom part of the tree, I'll be able to sit down some, really look down in there and see what it is. I think sometimes putting your head down here and looking up at this is a great way to help you see. You may have ideas, and then looking underneath is a great governor. You look underneath there and you go, oh yeah, that's so the way to go, or oh yeah, maybe not. Literati. Literati bonsai. You know, I love finding out. I'm a nerd. I really am. I'm a nerd. I would love to have more information for me and you guys about literati. Um, the official word on literati is hard to come by if it exists. You hear people talk about their interpretation of literati, and it takes a minute to figure out that when it comes to the other styles of trees, they're telling you that this is this style of tree because the trunk does this, and the first branch does this, and the second, and the main tree does this or doesn't, goes, and those aren't necessarily like rules that the tree has to have to exist in that category. That's just the category that somebody would place that tree in if they were to just stand back and say, what category does this tree fit in? Whether that's because it's had things done to it or not. I'm going back and seeing needles, so I messed up here. So that's how you define whether or not something is a formal upright, an informal upright, or whether or not, a cascade, right? You couldn't have a tree bend over the side of the pot and spiral all the way down and say, this is my interpretation of a formal upright. I mean, in one way, you could say that. It would probably be less correct thing to say though, because you wouldn't have shown that in sincerity of your work with that tree. So maybe in that instance, the statement would be that it could be anything. It could be what you say it is, which is kind of an artistic statement. Nobody really gets to say necessarily this is or isn't art, because a lot of times what we're saying when we say this is or isn't art is this angers me, this offends me, how dare they hang this on the wall and call it. And that very emotion would justify the work. Just prove beyond all shadow of a doubt it's art by being annoyed. It's kind of the ultimate na that art gives, in a way. So when it comes to literati, other art forms are very deliberate. Write a haiku, it needs to have this many syllables, and then that many syllables, and then this many syllables again, and then, it's like the haiku police are not going to come knocking down the door, but people will question whether or not you wrote a haiku if you don't follow the form. So, literati has also come to mean different things over the years. There was a time when China was credited with this art form, not literati, bonsai, what we call bonsai. People who were learned, who were not workaday Joes probably, but had time to tend to things and contemplate. They were responsible for what was deemed art and beauty. And some of these people may have been scholars, some of these people may have been philosophers, some of these people may have been wealthy and just had time to shoot their mouth off, and some of these people may have been monks. And there was a group of monks, as the story goes, who decided it would be a unique and wonderful experience to go into the mountains and collect trees and bring them back and discuss them. And that was called Literati. And it wasn't the whimsical, simplistic, overly simplistic, more foliage on the top than down at the bottom thing that you mostly see today, or the modern version that happened in the 70s that you still see today. It was all bonsai. It was the invention of bonsai was called Literati. We know that one of the emperors at the time was into bonsai, but he would have been into Literati. So any Literati he would have had would have looked like what we considered bonsai, but because he was a Literati, a learned person, and that was his tree, that would have made it Literati. When China opened up to the outside world, they opened up their imports, their textiles, their ideas, their art, a lot of things. And when the people of Japan saw these trees, they had sailed over. And on a world map, it's not that far, but it's not like just getting on the ferry and hopping over to the next island either. This would have been a fairly long trip. This would have been an involved deal. And when these guys saw these trees, they flipped out. That was the most awesome. Think about how you felt the first time you were blown away by bonsai, and think about people who had never heard of such a thing, no matter what it was called, seeing this for the first time. Of course they wanted to bring them back. Of course when it came time to go back where they came from, with their stories and with their drawings and their writings and everything they had accumulated in teaching from journeying to this new place that's just opened up. Of course they brought back trees with them. And on the trip, on ships, these guys weren't expert shippers when it came to bonsai trees. Nobody was. So, also, these guys were newly acquired bonsai artists, so most of those trees probably didn't even survive the trip. If they're lucky, their enthusiasm and some knowledge survived. So when they got home, at least they would be able to maybe start anew. But one thing that was likely is that bottom branches probably died while they were getting tousled around on a ship below decks or whatever, getting no light. And so when Japan saw these trees hanging on for dear life, with their bottom branches gone or dead, their impression of what bonsai was kind of this. The Chinese impression of the tree at the time was not this. When amateurs started trying to reproduce what they saw based on what came back from China, they invented bonsai, and literati became, their idea for this was bunjin. So whenever you see the two words, one of them would have been the original Chinese word for learned, and the other would have been what it became in Japan. That's how I understand it. The information is hard to come by, and translations are often vague. Like when people are talking about descriptions and it is translated from Japanese, I tend to hear the word soldier, not hear. I tend to read the word soldier a lot, and it occurred to me that that's probably or possibly in place of the word uniform, or I might be off the wrong track. So I've had difficulty trying to find out the entire skinny on what is literati, but